So it's happened. The release of the multi-part series released by Tucker Carlson on his show, Tucker Carlson Network, entitled The 9/11 Files. It was released on September 22nd, just yesterday. And I don't go on his website. I went and saw it was on YouTube. Someone recommended it to me to Messenger. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a review of it while watching along with you. So it's about 24 minutes long, and I'll stop long. It's almost like when I do my breakdown videos, and let's see.
For years now, politicians, the media, intel agencies in this country and abroad have all demanded that you believe the official story about 9/11. And here's what it is. They tell you a group of al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorists, many of whom were known to U.S. intel services, somehow managed to evade capture for years as they planned the most significant and elaborate terror attack in human history. We're told that despite repeated encounters with the FBI, the CIA, local law enforcement, airport security, foreign intel organizations, the right information somehow never made it to the right people. The government failed because it just didn't have the intelligence it needed. That's the story. That story is a lie. Nearly 25 years later.
Well, it's not. Here's the thing. Is it the whole truth? No. That's what I hate. I hate when I hear the official narrative. It's not an official narrative because the 9/11 Commission report, the final report itself, was not a fully completed investigation. There was omitted data intentionally from the investigators themselves, which is the reason why you hear that phrase from the 9/11 Truth Movement, oh, that the commission was set up to fail. That's what Thomas Keane said, the co-chair. Yes, commission was set up to fail because they didn't get all the information they wanted or needed. Not from the CIA, not from NORAD, not even from the State Department, or the Department of Defense, for that matter. Now, I know there's a big rush to get answers, but you have no right to make up things as you go along to satisfy your looming questions. And this is why the 9/11 Truth Movement failed. It's an outright failure because in the beginning, it had honest intentions. But then afterwards, they allowed for any competing crackpot theory because at least they opposed this narrative. And leading the way was Alex Jones, who's a friend to Tucker Carlson. Need I say any more? You have to ask yourself, why would Tucker Carlson want to be friends with a person who is known to spread disinformation, intentionally spread disinformation? I know a lot of you Jones fans say you can't trust the media, but you trust him. If he was a real whistleblower, he wouldn't be on the air making millions and millions of dollars for over 25 years. Sorry, pal. Doesn't work like that. Nevertheless, the Truth Movement is a good percentage of Tucker Carlson's, fan base. There's a certain, sizable percentage. So, and there's also a lot of hypocrisy here because a lot of the 9/11 Truth Movement that still exists today don't believe in hijackers. Some of them even believe that the planes were holograms. Some of them even believe that the hijackers are still alive. Okay, so there's competing theories. They all contradict one another. They don't make sense. But yet they're going to say that Tucker Carlson is telling the truth. But yet a lot of what Tucker Carlson says in the series, and I watched it previously, and it does not vibe with the Truth Movement at all, most of it. But I wouldn't say that the 9/11 Commission report is the official narrative because it's an incomplete report. It's an incomplete one.
The families of 3,000 civilians are still mourning the murder of their loved ones. Anyone who doubts the official narrative is cast as a kook, a criminal, a fringe conspiracy theorist, and punished. They've been blacklisted and censored and banned. even as the leaders who failed to protect our country on 9/11 used these attacks as a pretense to expand their own powers and permanently transform the United States. None of this is speculation. All of it is true. Over the course of this series, you will hear accounts from people who lived it. CIA officers and analysts who were there, FBI agents from the bin Laden unit, family members of the victims. None of these people are kooks. All of them have firsthand information. What they'll tell you is that what you have been told about September 11th is not true. Why are
Well, you know what? I want to hold off on that for a second because it's interesting to note, and people can change their minds, and we've seen it before. But about 15 years ago, about 15 years ago, about 15 years ago, Tucker Carlson was highly critical of the 9/11 truth movement. Like I said, he could have basically changed his mind. He came across information over time, said, wait a minute, something doesn't jive. So I want to play this video of Tucker Carlson being interviewed by somebody regarding the 9/11 truth movement.
If there's any evidence that the government was behind 9/11, look, I believe anything if there's evidence, but there isn't any. So knock it off. That's my view.
Ridiculous. So for family members of the victims that are asking questions and want the evidence that's been withheld by the government released, you would say that they're less than adults somehow for wanting that
I would say that parasites like you make it much worse for them. That's what I would say.
So it's funny. It's interesting. Look, I think he's genuine. I do think that he changed his mind. Here's my hesitation, is that when you have on Alex Jones to talk about 9/11, to me, that's a full stop. I can't trust you. And I'm willing to give Tucker Carlson the benefit of the doubt that maybe he's hanging around with the wrong people. Because if he's going to actually go and commiserate with Richard Gage's, the Bob Honegger's, the Alex Jones, you could throw all this series right out the fucking window. All right? Because it won't matter much. Right? It won't matter much. Because, if you're calling for an investigation and you want to know what happened on 9/11, one thing you can't do is basically interview people who are impeding on the investigation by propagating some of the most ridiculous conspiracy theories known to man. So I'm willing to give Tucker Carlson benefit of the doubt. Maybe he's hanging around with the wrong people. He should just disassociate from Alex Jones completely. That's what he should. That's the first step.
least of which the apparent role that former CIA Director John Brennan played in helping bring the 9/11 hijackers to the United States, and the remarkable lengths the CIA went to protect.
Wait a minute here. Wait a minute. Brennan was indeed a player within the Riyadh station, but the majority of the 9/11 hijackers came from the Jeddah station, and he wasn't the chief there. And I'm going to talk about that later
the
on.
9/11 hijackers from the FBI and from domestic law enforcement. Telling the full story requires starting before the attacks, going back to something called Alec Station, that was the CIA's bin Laden unit in 1999.
My name is Mark Rossini. I'm a former FBI agent. So from January 1999 to May of 2003, I was the FBI New York Joint Terrorism Task Force representative to Alec Station at CIA headquarters. Before 9/11, there were no sources in Al-Qaeda. None. There was a group of Pashtun caretakers, okay? They called them the Trod Pints. Trod Pints were these Pashtun people that were bin Laden's T-boys and T-gals, right? And they were the great source of the Pakistani intel service that was feeding information from the Trod Pints to the ISI to the CIA about what was going on in Al-Qaeda. They had all the electronic communication satellite shit in the world, imagery. I remember looking at images of bin Laden, in his courtyard, all that. Fine. But what's in his head? What's he saying? What's he doing? These people are 10,000 miles away. They don't give a shit about American law. They don't care about going to jail. They want to die. How are you going to get a source inside there?
Before September 11th, U.S.
What's
intel.
interesting is that I've known Mark Rossini for quite a while, and I got to meet him personally, which was, a thrill for me. I really love Mark Rossini. He's great, and I've had him on the show, The Darkened Hour. We've had some discussions, about 9/11 over the years, and he's the reason why I wanted to give up a long time ago, but he was the reason why not to, because he told me to persist and keep going, and I did. And thankfully, I did. But I'm glad that they start off the series with him, because he's a figure in the Bin Laden issue station. He's also a very close friend to John O'Neill. John O'Neill was the chief of the counterterrorism center in the FBI regarding Bin Laden, and was considered the best in the business. He also had Ali Soufan, the only Arabic speaker within that unit. And so, the New York office was the prominent office when it comes to Islamic fundamentalism, outside of, say, the only other city or the only other state or city, I would say, is Phoenix, because the Al Farouk mosque was there as well, but the building was in New York. And this is before 9/11. This is before the 93 bombing. New York, Phoenix, they were considered the preeminent city, but New York was number one. They had the most experience. And so Mark Rossini was the eyes and ears of John O'Neill at the Bin Laden issue station in the CIA, where you had, different agencies working there. It was a creation by, I think, David Nevin in 1996, where he wanted the FBI, the NSA, the CIA, all working together, sharing intelligence on one single mark, and that was Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda, because of the growing threat that they posed. But what happened? The opposite happened. The CIA withheld information from the FBI. The NSA withheld information from the CIA and the FBI. Nobody was working on the same playing field. The DIA, which is the intelligence arm of the Department of Defense, they also had run their own program. And I've interviewed multiple people regarding that, Eric Kleinsmith, and of course, Anthony Schaefer, the man himself. And the program is called Able Danger. Okay? Even they were not going to get any help from the CIA. So you had all these agencies that were supposed to work together, and had they done it, 9/11 wouldn't have happened. The embassy bombings wouldn't have happened. Probably USS Cole wouldn't have happened.
Services got most of their intelligence on bin Laden from what was called the Hada home switchboard in Sana'a, Yemen.
Right, and
that was
just a short summary on that. Ahmed al-Hada was an associate of Osama bin Laden from Afghanistan. He opened up a house. Bin Laden helped him buy a house in Yemen, in the capital of Sana'a, where this house would become a switchboard for Al Qaeda around the world. In other words, if an Al Qaeda member in Egypt or in Syria were to make a call or to pass a message to another Al Qaeda member, say in Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia, the calls in those countries are monitored because there's no privacy laws. Okay. So they had to go to coded messages to pass on to Ahmed al-Hada. And then Ahmed al-Hada would pass that message on to the recipient, which is either bin Laden, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, the military commander Mohammed Atef, or anybody else around the world. We're talking about the highest profile Islamic militants involved with Al Qaeda and groups like Abu Sayyaf and Jemaah Islamiyah, which are Al Qaeda associates in Southeast Asia, or somebody in Saudi Arabia, or somebody within Pakistan. So, but the conduit was the Yemen house. And the NSA knew about this house because the FBI was tracking an individual named Khalid al-Fawaz. Fawaz had bought a satellite phone. The FBI asked the NSA to decrypt the phone, but the phone wasn't just going to Khalid al-Fawaz. It went to another individual, and that name escapes me, which then went to bin Laden in Afghanistan. The NSA told the FBI that they decrypted the phone, and in 1996, they found out that there was one number that kept calling that phone, And bin Laden kept calling it. It was the Ahmed al-Hada house. So long before the FBI even knew what was going on, the CIA and the NSA knew about this number because the CIA had an operative inside the NSA operation regarding bin Laden. And so when the chief of station of the bin Laden issue unit, Michael Scheuer, went to the NSA's chief of, signals operator, or deputy director, Barbara McNamara, and said, hey, listen, you have decrypted the phone of bin Laden. You now have the phone number for the Ahmed al-Hada house. Now we can get a bug in the house, but we don't know what's being said on the phone. Can you give us the transcripts? And Bob McNamara said, no, but if you fuck up the operation, we're going to take it to court and we're going to screw you over. And Michael Scheuer, who's not known to the word no, backed down. And they built their own listening station off the coast of Madagascar. And then they started listening to the phone calls. And also they started watching people coming in and out of the house because they do human intelligence too. The NSA doesn't do that. So this all started in 1996. Now, see, I knew about bin Laden even well before that. And so did the NSA when he was in the Sudan in 1992. But that's neither here nor there. I don't want to lose you. But that's how they originally found out about the Ahmed al-Hada.
Communications hub that bin Laden and his associates used to communicate with each other. They were, at the time, living in Yemen. The FBI gained access to this after the 1998 embassy bombings in East Africa.
How did we officially get the Hada home in Sana'a, Yemen, on the books, on the radar, if you will? Okay. Nairobi, 1998, August 7th. John Antisef, Special Agent John Antisef, greatest FBI agent ever in the FBI, even better than me. John flies over to Nairobi, and one of the survivors, one of the perpetrators who chickened out and ran and lived, Daoud Rashid al-Awali, Saudi, he gets captured by the Kenyan police. John flies over from New York, and already there have been two FBI agents interviewing Daoud. They were getting someplace, but they really weren't getting that far, right? John walks in. And first thing he does, he says, you need some water? You want a drink? Did you eat today? Did you pray? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. He's fine. I said, just relax. Just let's have a chat. He didn't beat him with a phone book. He didn't fucking waterboard him. He didn't pull his fingernails out. He wasn't Mr. Tough Guy, like all these fucking assholes like Dick Cheney want to believe, right? They're all pieces of shit. He talked to him like a human being. Take me through the day. Talk to me. Well, I went to the hotel and I got my stuff ready. And? Did you call anybody? Yeah, I called this number. And he wrote it down. And he gave John the number of the Hada home in Sana'a, Yemen, which was the Al-Qaeda switchboard that we in the FBI had no fucking clue existed up until that point.
Right.
CIA and NSA did, because remember, they had been listening to the Nairobi cell and their activity since 1996. We in the FBI didn't know about that number.
The Hada home wasn't just a communications
And
hub.
that's because they didn't really want the FBI to know about what they were doing, right? They wanted to run their own operation. Now, what operation was that? Right? So there's conflicting theories about this. Now, it wasn't about turning Ahmed al-Hada. This is before that. What reason was there for the CIA and the NSA to withhold this information from the FBI? I'm going to tell you something later on that really just damns the NSA and the CIA for not telling the FBI regarding this, because there's a link between the Africa bombings, the bombing of the USS Cole, and 9/11, which didn't happen yet. But there were going to be two men, Khalid Ahmed and Wapahadbi, that are going to be in the prominent viewpoint soon. But just to show you that there was an intentional withholding of information. That's real specific. An intentional withholding of information for whatever reason. Now, the main reason is they wanted to flip Ahmed al-Hada. But what reason was there not to tell the FBI about 1996, about the Ahmed al-Hada home in 96? Now, the FBI investigates matters domestic. When it comes to abroad, it's the CIA. Still, you wouldn't want to share this information with the FBI for whatever reason? I don't know.
For Al Qaeda, it was the physical home of the father-in-law of Khalid al-Medhar, one of the future 9/11 hijackers.
At the end of
Because he
1999,
married the daughter of Ahmed al-Hada, Hoda al-Hada, Hoda. And that's what made him the father.
listening to that phone is when the CIA learns and the NSA learns that Khalid al-Medhar is going to be traveling from there to Dubai, and then from Dubai onward to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, to meet the summit.
The summit was a
Okay. To give you a little bit of context, the NSA, an analyst working on the hub, had listened to a phone call between someone named Khalid and sent the message to Khalid, that's Khalid al-Medhar, and Nawaf and Salim. Nawaf al-Hazmi and Salim al-Hazmi, brothers, about a meeting in Malaysia. Now, I'm going to fill in some blanks. You're going to talk about the counter-sheriff document in a minute. This is another plus for Tucker Carlson. Now, but what they don't mention in this show is that there was an FBI source inside a mosque called the King Fahd Mosque in December of '99 that overheard a phone call between its imam, whose name is Fahad al-Damari, over somebody over the phone. And this had to be Khalid, whose real name is Tawfiq bin Attash, who's currently in Guantanamo Bay, who is the alleged mastermind of the USS Cole bombing. And Khalid basically tells Fahad al-Damari that he's to expect two brothers in January of 2000. Now, this is December of '99, mind you. Before the meeting, before their arrival in the United States. An FBI source overheard this. This is after the fact now. Source doesn't tell the FBI until after 9/11, of course, obviously. So that's just to put that in
meeting of an operational cadre of al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorists from around the world.
He was scheduled to travel on or about January 5th, 2000. The NSA has the ability, did and probably still has, to get any airplane reservation it wants in the world and know about it, right? We knew his passport number, we had the phone, we have everything. So we knew his travel information. We knew what flights he was taking, we knew what seat he was going to sit in. The CIA arranges for when he gets to Dubai to be secondary, okay? Not fully questioned, but, talk to him a little bit. And then he goes to his hotel room and they arrange to search his room and go in. And when they go in, his passport is there, and they take pictures of it and photocopy it. And they send back the imagery. And lo and behold, in his passport is a visa to go to the United States of America, issued out of the American consulate in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
According to one recently released court filings, quote, the visas were issued to facilitate an operation run by the Saudis and the CIA spying operation.
Let's talk about this for a minute, because this is important. Yes, the Jeddah visas were issued by a consular officer, and they don't name her in here, but I did a whole podcast on this. Her name is Shaya Steinger. Okay. Now, I want to share something with you, which is a memorandum of conversation. And I want to show you this, right? And I'm going to blow this up just a little bit so you could read it too along with me. Okay. Now, we're going to read page 2. And this is going to talk about how she issued these visas. Okay. Now, as you can see here, look, so this is page 1. I want to go to page 2, right? There were 2 officers in the Jeddah office. Section Chief Art Mills, who was on home leave. And there was another person, I think his name is mentioned on here. What's his name? Well, anyway, there were two officers, Shania Steiger and somebody else, right? What I want you to read is this. There were no travel agency programs used in Jeddah before the Visa Express program. Now, the State Department in the summer of 2001, because they wanted better relations with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, created a program called the Visa Express program, where applicants in Saudi Arabia would be fast-tracked to getting a green card, whether it be work visa or a tourist visa, and without any secondary interviews or even a face-to-face. They would have their applications approved if it was filled out correctly and fast-tracked. They would allow entry in the United States. Now, there were no travel agency programs in Jeddah before the Visa Express. Only the Saudis, the national headquartered in Jeddah, and the Saudi government used a drop-off system for submitting applications. There were no other personal appearance waiver programs. Most individuals walked into the consulate and dropped off the application. It doesn't even have to be the applicant. It could be somebody dropping off their applicants. So in other words, the hijackers, most of them, the muscle hijackers, they were incomplete. Most, like I said, I did the podcast, I talked about this, that most of the applications were incomplete. Some of them had no idea where they were going. They had no funds. And this would cause discretion. There would be a second hearing. There would be a face-to-face with a consular officer and the person, the applicant, and they would get denied just about. But the Saudis would dismiss and TCNs were interviewed. Now, Blank was opposed to some of this, the other person working with Shane Steiger, which was initiated on June 1st of 2001. But not for reasons related to terrorism. Shane Steiger felt that Riyadh imposed the Visa Express program on them. And she believed that Riyadh made the program mandatory because the Consul General in Riyadh, Tom Fury, had excellent experience with a similar program in Mexico. Now, she says in this that there were no direct hits regarding, see here, there's no direct hits regarding some of the people, that were 9/11 hijackers later on, that didn't require any secondary hearings, and that they were overwhelmed with work. Okay, this is where I want to read you from. Now, Jeddah consular staff believed they were a little tougher on educating NTVs than Embassy Riyadh, where John Brennan was talking. That's what Tucker Carlson talks about. But this is the consular office that they should have been talking about. I don't know why they were talking about Riyadh or John Brennan, for that matter. Nevertheless, during December 2001, the Section Chief Art Mills was on home leave, and the NIV officer was working alone, and Shania Steiger. All told, she had issued 20,000 visas during her tenure at Jeddah. She routinely worked until 10 p.m. to catch up on the large number of visa applications. Nevertheless, she wanted to continue Jeddah's practice of interviewing first-time Saudi applicants for student visas. During the busy summer, Blank, the other officer, worked very hard, working 400 to 500 cases per day. She said she had no time to look beyond the name and the date of birth of the visa application forms. She knew that some of them were incomplete, but believed that this did not matter because the Saudi applicants were eligible for the Visa Express program. That's what I wanted to show you. So in other words, that's how a lot of these 9/11 hijackers got inside the country, including Khalid al-Mihdhar. So just wanted to bring that up and clarify, because they don't talk about that on this show. It's not about the Riyadh. It's about the Jeddah office.
The station chief in Riyadh at the time was future CIA Director John Brennan. The CIA continued tracking al-Mihdhar to Kuala Lumpur, where he met up with other al-Qaeda associates, including Nawaf al-Hazmi, a second future 9/11 hijacker.
He lands in Kuala Lumpur. They entrust the Malaysia Special Branch police to surveil this terror summit in this park in Kuala Lumpur. And so much so to tail them and to surveil them, etc. And that information ends up in a communication from Kuala Lumpur Station CIA to CIA headquarters, to Alex Station, to the computer screen of me and Special Agent Doug Miller of Washington Field Office FBI. You have this cable that lays out the meeting in Kuala Lumpur, the photocopying of his passport in Dubai, and the learning of the visa to go to the United States of America. Doug Miller gets up from his cubicle of power, comes over to my cubicle of power and says, hey, we got to tell the FBI about this. I said, Doug, you're damn right. He goes, I'll write up the CIR. What is a CIR? A CIR is what is a Central Intelligence Report. Doug writes it, he sends it to me. I approve it, and it goes to the desk of Michael Ann Casey, the CIA officer, analyst. And it sits in her queue, her electronic queue, and it doesn't move for like a day or two. It should move in a fucking few hours. I'll never forget, like it was yesterday. I'll never forget. I standing over her, I said, hey, Doug's CIR. It's got to go to the FBI. He said, no, it's not. I said, well, why not? She said, because it's not FBI, not an FBI matter. What do you mean it's an FBI matter? She said, it's a CIA matter. And when and if we want the FBI to know, we will tell them. And you are not to say anything. I said, but they got a visa.
Now, the reason why is because Michelle Ann Casey is basically saying that the next attack is happening in Southeast Asia. Because if it happened, if they surmise that the next attack is happening abroad, the FBI does not have, that means that the FBI is not really involved in the case. Because they were more worried about the FBI arresting Al-Mihdhar Hazmi, ruining the case. But as we later on find out through the Canestraro revelation, that the CIA was running an operation with Saudi intelligence, which they talk about here. I give a lot of credit to Tucker Carlson for bringing up the Canestraro document, which shows that, through seeing classified information, CIA and FBI officials, including congressional officials, basically went on the record without, with their names being held anonymous because they looked at classified information that showed that the CIA was running a black operation with Saudi intelligence and monitoring Khalid al-Mihdhar Hazmi, who were known Al-Qaeda operatives, because Saudi intelligence told the CIA about them back in 1996. Okay, so just to put that in perspective. So they were running an illegal operation because CIA is not allowed to run operations inside the United States. They were using a foreign intelligence operation to gather intelligence. Now, at the same time, now they don't talk about it on this show, there was an Israeli operation. Now, it could have been separate from the CIA and the Saudis. I believe it was, that were monitoring Islamic militants inside the United States. Now, how long has that been going on? Now, for example, if the 9/11 hijackers are inside the United States, I'm willing to bet that the Israelis knew about them before they even came to the United States. Now, that just goes to show you that they knew more about what they alluded to. Now, again, this is speculation. I don't have evidence of this. But according to, documents like the Gerald Shea Memorandum, which was an outline of all the Israeli nationals that were posing as art students and moving from companies. And some of these people had intelligence backgrounds, including military backgrounds, doing signals and human intelligence on not just the hijackers, but later on, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the FBI, the Secret Service, the State Department, Southwest Laboratories, all throughout the Northeast and Southwest of the United States. In August 2001, the Israelis handed a list, according to sources like Newsweek and the Associated Press, that an Israeli official handed a list to the CIA in August 2001 about a list of names. Who were these names? 9/11 hijackers. Well, how the fuck would they know about them? Again, there's no direct piece of paper or documentation that says the Israelis knew something about 9/11. I'm just pure speculating. I want to be very careful here because to talk about them is taboo. But it makes you wonder how long these intelligence services were monitoring these people that were involved in terrorist organizations and plots.
Easy to come to the U.S. Like, they should know we're handling it, and when we want to tell the FBI, we will. And I looked at her, and remember, she got up, but she put her hands on her hip, pointing a finger at me. Now, in my naivete, I believed her. And I have to live with that every day of my life, that I believed her.
So here's a company we're always excited to advertise. They don't know you. Antibiotic.
Thailand. He was accompanied by a man they identified as Al-Hazmi. According to the official account, this is where the trail went cold. The CIA placed their names on a watch list and asked that Thai authorities track their movements. 3 months later, the Thai government reported back.
Just want to also let you know, they don't talk about it too, the NSA didn't lose track of them because Nawaf al-Hazmi had a cell phone. And the NSA knew about their travel to Thailand and from Thailand to the United States. The CIA, by default, knew about that too.
Al-Hazmi.
Had boarded a United Airlines flight to Los Angeles.
Al-Midhar was with him. The two hijackers had arrived in the United States.
But here's my problem.
They arrived on January 15th of 2000. They were at the meeting between January 5th and January 8th of 2000. So they arrived inside the United States in January 15, 2000. And there was a cab driver named Khalid Benamarine, a Tunisian cab driver, that was tasked to pick up two men by Fahad al-Tamari. Now, remember what I said, that there was an FBI source inside the King Fahd Mosque in December of 1999? Well, Fahad al-Tamari, according to Khalid Benamarine, because the FBI interviewed him after 9/11, who told you to go to the LA airport? Fahad al-Tamari. How about that one?
With this whole fucking thing and the whole subsequent investigation of 9/11. You have the CIA then following.
By the way, what happened to Khalid Benamarine? Well, once he gave that interview, and he gave 2 interviews to the FBI, Director Robert Mueller ordered him to be deported. Why? Why? Because of the enormous pressure of the Bush White House to not investigate the Saudis for anything related to 9/11. Now you see why there's conspiracies.
One man and then two men all over the planet, and then eventually even to America, right? Landing in Los Angeles, California, and you don't tell the FBI.
But why would the CIA want to hide the highly relevant and potentially dangerous fact that 2 known al-Qaeda terrorists had just landed in California? According to a recently released court filing, former White House counterterrorism czar Richard Clarke told...
By the way, thank you, Florida Bulldog, for bringing attention to the Castro document. And I did a 3-part series regarding the reading of the document as soon as it was released. I heard about it from NorthJersey.com, but they got it from the Florida Bulldog. So,
government investigators that the, quote, CIA was running a false flag operation to recruit the hijackers.
When Cofer Black became the head of the Counterterrorism Center at CIA, he was aghast that they had no sources in al-Qaeda. So he told me, I'm going to try to get sources in al-Qaeda. I can understand them possibly saying, we need to develop sources inside al-Qaeda. When we do that, we can't tell anybody about it.
After Clarke made that claim publicly, he received an angry call from former director of the CIA, George Tenet, who did not deny the allegations made by Mr. Clarke, end quote.
But when we reached out to Tenet, his spokesperson denied that the CIA was recruiting hijackers, calling it false rumors and saying, quote, that's categorically not true.
He also recalled that the executive director of the 9/11 Commission, Philip Zelikow, blocked the commission's investigation into the matter at the behest of Condoleezza Rice.
CIA had this delusional grand plan. So the CIA, with their information that they had from the Hada house and their own psychological analysis of everybody in that team, they figured the best way is maybe to recruit somebody who came over from Malaysia. Khalid Midhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. We kept the FBI at bay because we told Mark Rossini and Doug Miller to shut the fuck up. So let's just try to get inside there. And that's what went wrong. That was the grand lie, the grand risk, the grand delusion. You had a duty to protect Americans, And you failed because of your fucking fantastical delusion that you could recruit somebody inside the cell.
The official 9/11 report does not address the CIA's plan to recruit the hijackers. It's not even mentioned. It's possible this is because the CIA blocked 9/11 Commission investigators from talking to the agents who participated in the plot. Amazingly, the CIA's director of operations kept the CIA operative attempting to recruit the hijackers, referred to as VVV in the documents, away from the Commission's investigators. The consequence of this? The Commission's explanation for this story is that the CIA made an honest mistake.
Wrong. Now, let me put this into perspective, because this is even worse. Now, according to the Can Australia document, there was a discussion between the CIA Director of Operations, James Pavitt, and the Director of the CIA himself, the DCI, George Tenet, about Pavitt approving of Tenet's decision to send away the station chief of Alex Station from 1999 to 2002, Richard Blee, who replaced Shoya, and the Yemen hub manager, Michelle Ann Casey, to Afghanistan. There's a great book by legendary CIA case officer, it was Operation Jawbreaker, and I forgot that guy's name. Man, I am sorry. He headed the operation itself. Damn, I wish I knew that guy's name. I'm going to cheat. Take a look. Gary Bernstein. Jeez, my mind is shot. I'm getting older. Gary Bernstein, who was head of this operational unit with Afghanis, the CIA's Special Activities Division, and Special Forces, Delta, where they were chasing bin Laden and Dr. Ahmed al-Zawahiri and the Taliban in Pakistan, the border of Pakistan, Afghanistan, through the Battle of Tora Bora, it's called. And Gary Bernstein had taken over from another operative named Gary Schroen, who was retiring. So Bernstein had bin Laden surrounded. And then he calls to the general of SOCOM, Tommy Franks, says, we need 200 more operatives. Can you send it? We can destroy bin Laden, kill him right here, and that's it. And Franks, who's acting on orders of the president himself, said no, use the Afghans. They couldn't be trusted because Afghans had notable loyalties to money. Whoever paid them more, that's who they were fighting for. Nevertheless, Bernstein is replaced. Who is he replaced by? None other than Richard Blee, who brings along Michelle Ann Casey, which means that the CIA sent over Blee and Michelle Ann Casey on purpose so they wouldn't be questioned by either the Joint House Inquiry or the 9/11 Commission. Why? Because they were the ones who withheld information. They were the ones in charge of the Yemen hub operation. They were the ones who withheld information from the FBI intentionally, and they didn't want them slipping up. That's the reason why. And the director of the CIA knew about it and lied under oath. And the director of operations, James Pavitt, also was in on it, which means that Cofer Black, Tom Wilshire, and all these motherfucking ghouls at the CIA at the time knew about it and lied about it. Now, I want to play just a small video regarding probably the most infamous part of the investigation itself, which talks about the CIA withholding information intentionally from the FBI regarding Richard Blee's tenure. And I'm going to play this video because I played it before. And again, show you that there was malfeasance on top of George Tenet, who is a liar. This is the most damning part out of any investigation. And how the 9/11 truth movement didn't play this on loop for the last 20 years is fucking beyond.
Let me read you the staff report. The CIA analyst who attended the New York meeting acknowledged to the Joint Inquiry staff that he had seen the information regarding al-Midar's U.S. visa and al-Hazmi's travel to the United States, but he stated that he would not share information outside of the CIA unless he had authority to do so.
That order came from Tenet himself. The analyst is Clark Shen. Clark Shen went to a meeting in New York in June of 2001. In Washington, D.C., met with another agent there, Steve Bongard, and I think Tina Corsi was there, and basically said that Khalid al-Mihdhar and Wafa Hazmi are in this picture that they didn't know about before. And they asked him, where are these guys? And he didn't tell them about the U.S. visas, didn't tell them about the meeting in Malaysia, didn't tell them about their connection to an individual named Khalid, didn't tell them anything. Hear the rest.
That's what he told our staff. Do you disagree with that?
Sir, I've talked to him as well.
Do you disagree that he said that to our staff?
Well, no, I don't disagree. He said it to your staff. I'm telling you what
Did he
told
tell
me.
you something differently?
Yes, sir. He
Okay.
gave me a different
So
perspective.
he told
on the
you and he told our staff something differently.
Well,
Not to do it.
Okay.
But I think it's important, sir.
Yeah, but our time is limited, so let me just keep going. That's the answer. He told you something differently from what he told our staff. Mr. Mueller, Director Mueller, at that June 11th meeting, did the FBI know that Mihdhar and Hazmi were at the January 2000 meeting of al-Qaeda operatives in Malaysia?
I don't believe they did.
All right. So we still don't know in June of 2001 what the CIA has known for 15 months.
My God, how that isn't blaring on every truther website known to man is beyond me. It's beyond me. Because you don't believe in hijackers. Because your movement's a bunch of kooks. And because Alex Jones and Jim Fetzer and Rich Gage and all those people don't do proper research. Because they don't want an informed audience. Because they're not about law and order. They're about profits. They're grifters. And finally, we have somebody 24 years later bringing attention to the case. So Tucker Carlson deserves some credit here. I'd like to see him disassociate himself completely from Alex Jones, though. If he doesn't do that, we got a problem.
The actual language in the report says the CIA played, quote, zone defense, and the FBI had a man-to-man approach to counterterrorism. The difference in strategies is why the CIA didn't tell the FBI that terrorists had arrived on American soil. Incredibly, the commission investigators didn't ask the CIA director at the time, George Tenet, about the summit in Kuala Lumpur or why the CIA had blocked the FBI from being warned. It wasn't the story they wanted.
And that is the crux of the matter, and that is the truth. And no one has ever answered those questions. No one has the balls to, because they're afraid. Because the house will come tumbling down.
Partly.
So
Yeah.
how exactly did the CIA try to recruit the 9/11 hijackers? Well, one amazing thing about their arrival is that they didn't try to hide. The hijackers used their real
Right out in the
names
open.
while in the United States. They operated in plain daylight. Al-Hazmi and al-Mihdhar lived in San Diego for more than a year before the attacks. They lived openly. In fact, they were so open that Hazmi's name, address, and a home phone number were listed in the San Diego phone book. When they arrived, the hijackers encountered a Saudi intel operative called Omar al-Bayoumi. They met at a restaurant outside of Los Angeles.
The CIA utilized the Saudis in the form of Omar al-Bayoumi to spy for them and to gather intelligence.
Before 9/11, the CIA was forbidden.
Funny thing about that is Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf Hazmi, would later tell an individual named Abdulsadah Sheikh that he didn't trust Omar al-Bayoumi because he thought he was a Saudi spy. In other words, that Omar al-Bayoumi was so fucking outside his own head because he used to walk around carrying a fucking camera, always had money, never worked. This guy just screamed like, an intelligence officer that even the fucking hijackers knew and didn't trust him.
Engaging in domestic spying. They used the Saudi intelligence as a workaround.
will rely upon the Saudi GID, General Intelligence Directorate, their version of the CIA, via Prince Bandar, via their man, Omar al-Bayoumi, to keep us informed as to the activity of these terrorists.
Bayoumi's notebook, which was uncovered when British law enforcement raided his home in the
Scotland
UK,
Yard.
contained a drawing of an airplane and mathematical
Yeah.
calculations related to flying it. The 9/11 Commission investigators never saw this. At the time, al-Bayoumi had a no-show job at a Saudi aviation contractor called Avco. The company
Avco.
employees say he was one of roughly 50 ghost employees working there at the time, taking a paycheck but never coming to work. According to the classified government documents, an investigator from the 9/11 Commission said al-Bayoumi was receiving substantial sums of money from the Saudi embassy in Washington prior to the 9/11 attacks, that the money was being funneled from accounts at Riggs Bank in Georgetown, belonging to Haifa bin Faisal, the wife of the Saudi ambassador to the United States. By using the Saudis as a proxy to recruit the 9/11 hijackers, the CIA gave itself cover. If things went wrong, they could push a narrative that blamed the Saudi government for the attacks, which is what they did.
For all intents and purposes, Omar al-Bayoumi was an employee of the Saudi Arabian embassy in Washington, D.C., in their consulate in Los Angeles, California.
Al-Bayoumi convinced the hijackers to move to San Diego, helped them find an apartment. He served as a co-signer on the lease to that apartment. He paid their first month's rent and deposit. He got them bank accounts. He got them driver's license. He introduced them to many other radical Muslims in the area, including the cleric.
Anwar al-Awlaki is the one who opened up the bank account at SunTrust in San Diego when they moved. Because when they arrived to Los Angeles, they stood. Now, they didn't mention this in the show. When al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi stood in the United States, the first couple of weeks, the 9/11 Commission said they didn't know where they stood. But later on, as we found out through Operation Encore, which was the follow-up to the Pent Bomb investigation, that they stood at an apartment complex rented by Fahad al-Tameri. Fahad al-Tameri let al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi stay there for 3 weeks. Then they were relocated to San Diego. And the contact in San Diego is Omar al-Bayoumi, who met them at the Mediterranean Cafe, which is the name of the cafe that they met in. And, al-Bayoumi lied about that too. His associate, Carlson bin Dan, would give multiple accounts to the FBI, contradicting Bayoumi's statement about, them being in the restaurant first. Carlson bin Dan told one account that they walked in and al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi were already at the restaurant. So it's interesting to note that there's conflicting accounts about this. But yeah, al-Awlaki set up the bank account.
Omar al-Awlaki. Eventually, al-Mihdhar went home to Yemen.
Khalid al-Mihdhar leaves America for his daughter's birth, right? And in that time, he loses his passport. He claims he went to Afghanistan. He goes back to Jeddah and gets another passport.
Shania Steiger.
And by this time, even prior, as I understand it now, the Saudis had identified the terrorists, the hijackers, as potential threats to the kingdom and had put chips in their passports identifying them as a threat. Al-Mihdhar comes back to the United States, I believe it was on July 4th, 2001. He's allowed back in, not stopped, not questioned. So here's a guy that the CIA knew came to America, happened at his terrorist summit meeting in Malaysia in January 2000. He's allowed to leave, come back.
Mihdhar was able to exit.
I want to talk about this for a second because the 9/11 Commission talks about this too. All right. And you have to really listen to the explanation they give. Now, Carl Levin is, he's deceased now, but if he's the one person I would love to interview because he goes into depths about al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi like no other. And, here, I'm going to play this video and listen to the explanation they give about not about the CIA not watch listing al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi. And they talk, this is George Tenet, the director. Listen to what he has to say.
Here, I don't want just a general answer here that there was a lot of workload and
No,
so
sir.
forth. But what reason was given specifically by the CIA person responsible for putting that name on the watch list as to the failure to do so?
We're not putting the name on the watch list. Our judgment is in talking to everybody working at the time that there were uneven standards, poor training, and we didn't
For
give
that
them.
specific failure? All those reasons for that specific
Yes, sir,
failure?
we did not. Everybody, the people involved, or people who have access, who we've talked to, acknowledge that there were uneven practices, bad training, and a lack of redundancy. The fact that they were swamped does not mitigate the fact that we didn't overcome that with either redundancy, a separate unit, or better training. for
Have
those
you
people.
identified the person or persons who are responsible to put that name on the watch list?
We know who was working this case.
I mean, oh, dude, he's a fucking liar. It's because the Mahabet, the General Intelligence Directorate, told the CIA about al-Midar Hazmi back in '96 and that they were Al Qaeda. Automatically, that's a watch list. And the CIA didn't even do that. I mean, damn these motherfuckers, man, right? They didn't talk about that in the show, but there's a lot they missed. These guys, Tucker Carlson missed. I mean, he can't fit everything. He's, trying to make it into 25 minutes, but this is the reason why you can't explain 9/11 in 5 to 10 minutes like some people do.
Country will, because he was issued a multi-visit U.S. visa. According to a summary of an interview with an FBI agent from Alex Station, quote, while Hamzi and Al-Midhar obtained their visas to enter the United States, the American
I showed you the document, right?
Saudi Arabia. All told, the vast majority, the 19 9/11 hijackers, had their visas issued at that consulate in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. At the time, John Brennan was running the CIA station there. Just a few days before Al-Midhar re-entered the country at JFK Airport in New York, the FBI and the CIA held a joint meeting in New York City to discuss the bombing of the USS Cole,
June
which
11th.
Al-Midhar was involved in.
Killed 17 soldiers on the USS Cole.
An FBI agent was shown a photograph
Steve
Al-Midhar
Bongo.
taken at the summit in Kuala Lumpur. The agent asked the CIA who this man was, but the CIA once again refused to tell them. It wasn't until August of 2001 that the CIA finally alerted the FBI. And of course, by then, it was too late.
Now, a little backstory on that meeting. So the FBI found out that the CIA found out about al-Midhar and Hazmi, that the CIA knew about these two men long before this meeting, and knew about them for a long time. So to save face, the director, George Tenet, along with the director of Counterterrorism Center, the Alex Station, Richard Blee, the chief of station, go and hold a meeting, a rushed meeting, with Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell, and the FBI director, Richard Clark, the counterterrorism's director himself, director of the counterintelligence. I forgot. Ah, damn it. Anyway, so they're like, all right, these two men, Khalid al-Midhar and Awad Hazmi, they're inside the United States. Now, Richard Clark is like saying, well, how long have you kept this information from us? But, they said, we don't know, and we're still trying to gather that information, but they're in the United States. But you know what the CIA didn't tell? Where they were and whether they had dual U.S. visas. They still kept that from them. Why? This is August 26th. August 22nd, 2001, when they had this meeting. I mean, 9/11 is like in 2 weeks. And the FBI is now going to try to find a needle in a haystack. Imagine trying to find two guys in the whole country. Now, I want to show you something. What makes this even worse of the CIA's part is that there's a link between al-Midhar, al-Hazmi, and a bomber and a mastermind of the Cole bombing. Okay? His name is Taufik bin Attash. Okay? Now, why am I mentioning this? Because this is important. This means that the FBI should have been notified about al-Hazmi and al-Midar as soon as they landed inside the United States. And this would have been a reason to arrest them at the airport. Was that now you have a link between two al-Qaeda operatives coming to the United States, and that they had met with the mastermind, the alleged mastermind of the Cole bombing, Khalad, Tawfiq bin Attash. The FBI were investigating that matter. It was a crime on U.S. persons, which means that the Department of Justice would be prima facie, they would get carte blanche. They're the lead investigative agency. However, the CIA was the lead agency involving in the al-Hazmi al-Midar matter. And so they intentionally withheld this information from the FBI, which means they impeded on the investigation. That's not me saying it. Let's hear it from the director of the CIA himself, who lied about this.
On October 12th, 2000, bin Laden operatives attacked the USS Cole. The FBI, which investigated that attack, learned that a bin Laden follower, Khalad, was the principal planner of the Cole bombing, and that two other participants in the Cole conspiracy had delivered money to Khalad at the Malaysia meeting. Now, the FBI told the CIA about those facts. That information came from the FBI to the CIA. CIA went back, reviewed the facts that they had about the Malaysia meeting again. And as a result of that review, in January of 2001, the CIA determined that Khalad had actually been at the Malaysia meeting, and that Midhar and Hazmi, then, they knew, you knew, had been involved with the planner of the Cole bombing. Actually been with the planner of the Cole bombing at the Malaysia meeting.
Which means the FBI should have been known.
CIA again failed to put either Hazmi or Midhar on the watch list, or to notify the FBI that Hazmi was in the United States. And my question is, do you know who was responsible for that failure?
Sir, can I take you back on
Sure.
the facts for a moment? First of all, in terms of the identification of Khalad, actually it was the FBI who provided the information to us, because we were in a joint meeting at the time at a third country, because we were running a joint case with somebody who identified Khalad. And indeed, in January of 2001, the legal attaché from this third country writes messages to both our headquarters that after having been shown the surveillance photos of Kuala Lumpur, he made an identification of Khalad.
I think that's
So
it.
at that point, sir, both the CIA and the FBI know that Midhar was in Malaysia, and that in this time period, and that Khalad was in Malaysia at this time period as well.
Now that's irrelevant to my point. What you did not notify the CIA of at that point.
No, the FBI.
Excuse me, but you did not notify, thank you, the FBI of at that point, is that you knew that Hazmi was in the United States.
That's correct, sir.
That's January now of 2001. Another failure.
Sir, there are three instances, as I note in my testimony, on three separate occasions.
I know. My question, do you know who was responsible to notify the FBI at that time?
I don't, but I will find out for you.
And he never did anyway, so it didn't matter, right? But right there shows that the CIA knew that al-Hazmi and al-Midar met with the planner of the Cole bombing, which was investigated by the FBI, which means that the CIA, knowing that al-Hazmi and al-Midar were coming to the United States, should have told the FBI about them landing January 15th of 2000 at LAX, where they could have arrested them. 9/11 would not have happened had this happened. Or part of 9/11 would have been compromised, at least. And who knows, had they been arrested, would they have folded and told people about the operation? We don't know. We could speculate, play armchair quarterback all we want. But I'm just saying that here you have an intentional withholding of information from the FBI regarding a connection between two known al-Qaeda operatives with the planner of the Cole bombing, why the FBI should have been known about the arrival of these two men, and they did. And they did.
It's not just Mark Rossini who testifies to this. Another anonymous FBI agent told investigators that, quote, she believed the CIA's operation may have spun out of control, and that they, the CIA, came to the FBI with limited information in an attempt to locate the hijackers without revealing the true nature or extent of their operation against Al Qaeda, end quote.
This is the failure of the 9/11 Commission and every other fucking commission that ever existed after that.
But if the CIA was grooming the hijackers as sources, the FBI failed too. When al-Hazmi and al-Midhar were in California, they lived for a period in the home of an FBI informant called Abdus Sattar.
His name was Abdus Sheikh. I don't know, Tucker Carlson's not too good with Arabic names. It's okay, I'm not good with them either. But his name was Abdus Sheikh, and he was allegedly an employee at San Diego State Community College teaching English. And they found out that that wasn't true either. He lied about that. He was renting rooms at a house of his. And when Al-Midhar and al-Hazmi moved out of the apartment in at al-Bayoumy's home, the apartment that al-Bayoumi got them, they went to Lemon Grove, California, and they went to this mosque, and there was like banners for rooms being rented, and Al-Midhar and al-Hazmi took a thing, and the phone number would belong to Abdus Sheikh. They called him, and they rented rooms from him. The FBI had recruited Abdus Sheikh as a source because he was so well known in the Islamic community. For the last 20 years, he was considered a C1 source, high confident, high valued source, because there was a spate of bombings, like this small bombings in California, like in the 80s or like early 90s or something like that. And I just wanted to know about, nefarious individuals regarding Hezbollah or, whatever at the time. So he was giving them like decent information. The FBI in charge of this case is Stephen Butler, who codenamed him Stan and had a file on him for years. But Abdus Sheikh told Stephen Butler about, these two guys, they're from Saudi Arabia, they're trying to be pilots, but they don't speak much English, and they're religious Muslims. And so, Butler pressed them, what's their full names? And, Abdus Sheikh told him only their surnames. That was it. And Butler never pressed him on after that.
And somehow, the FBI never learned about this. Then, less than a month before the terror attacks, the FBI began an investigation into a French-Moroccan national called Zacharias Moussaoui. He had just moved to Minneapolis from Oklahoma, where he resumed aviation training. After raising suspicions during training, he was arrested on August 16th and charged with immigration violations. But agents were denied permission to search his laptop and the room where he was staying. His exact connection to the hijacking remains unclear even now, but he did receive wire transfers from Ramzi Ben Al-Shib, who was also sending money to the hijackers. In July,
A little bit of backstory on this. Zacharias Moussaoui is a French national. He was known to have links with Abu Hamza, who had hooks for hands and is known as a radical imam. He had ties to numerous individuals involved with terrorist groups. Wasn't the brightest of bulbs, but actually was smart. Was a smart guy. Even the judge who sentenced him for the 9/11 attacks involved in trying to hijack planes, he said that because Moussaoui acted as his own lawyer and said that you're highly intelligent, right? Moussaoui initially said that he was selected to be part of the initial hijacking team of the planes operation. However, he changed the story. He fell out of favor and was relegated to the second wave of attacks. Now, this is something that's not mentioned on the show, and it's something very few people know. Myself and DJ Thermal Detonator and Paul Thompson, the only people to really talk about this. And this was acknowledged by the Joint House Inquiry's co-chair, Bob Graham, the late Bob Graham, where they said that they believed that there were going to be a second wave of attacks, additional hijackings. Later on, the TMZ published a report about United Airlines Flight 23 being a potential hijack. Now, I've always said this because the original planes operation, if we're to believe it, take this with a grain of salt, that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind of 9/11 attacks, went to bin Laden in 1999 to propose that they hijack 10 planes. And this was later on, through a second meeting, bin Laden agreed to 4 planes. But if the intelligence community saw, heard about 10 planes and ran along with it, and then, there was a number of different operatives involved with the attacks outside of Al Qaeda, who were they? Or if they were Al Qaeda, why didn't the FBI investigate those people? Because only 4 planes crashed. And so they only had to do individuals that were involved with the 4 planes. That's why everyone else and all these additional plane hijackings weren't investigated. They didn't need to, because they weren't successful hijackings or it crashed anywhere. So we don't have to explain. So, plus you have the people that were arrested on September 14th when the ban was lifted from the FAA. DJ Thermidor did a great series about that. And nobody talks about these. But Moussaoui, even admitted in court that, yes, I was part of the plane's operation. And he wasn't tortured, by the way.
2001, an FBI agent stationed in the Phoenix field office sent a memo to headquarters theorizing that there could be, quote, a coordinated effort by Osama bin Laden to send individuals to the United States to receive aviation training.
That's right.
For some reason, this memo was never received by headquarters, not until after 9/11.
That's right.
Why? Possibly because as late as 2003, the FBI didn't have a functioning internal email system. Most case files were digitized. They weren't searchable, and employees did not have access to the internet. It's true. By September 2001, the Bureau's computers were so out of date, it took 12 commands simply to save a document. And in the aftermath of the attack,
Dinosaur agency used to call them.
Photographs of the suspected hijackers via express mail. They didn't have scanners. The Bush administration worked hard for us not to know any of this. They hid it. Many of these details were discovered during the Congressional Joint Inquiry into 9/11. But when Congress released its report, the 28 pages dealing with the hijackers' time in Southern California were hidden. They were redacted.
That's right.
When a man called Philip Zelikow took over as the commission's executive director, he reached a secret agreement with the White House to block his investigators from accessing records related to the hijackers.
That's why it's an incomplete report.
Rescreened them. Government documents show that the commission investigator assigned to this topic complained that, quote, Zelikow limited the number of witnesses that commission investigators could interview. And just days before the report was released, Dieter Snell, senior counsel to the commission, attempted to remove most of the details of the Saudi collaboration with the hijackers. Some of the findings were included in the end, but they were buried in the footnotes. The truth is, the official 9/11 Commission report, sold to the American public and the world for decades as the definitive account of what happened that day, is a lie.
9/11 Commission.
See, I might listen, man. This is you can't. That's that's irresponsible. If you're going to say the 9/11 Commission report is a whole lie, that means that the hijackings didn't happen, the hijackers didn't happen, the intelligence services withholding information didn't happen. This is such a fucking stupid move that the Truth Movement says. It's not a lie. It's an incomplete report. Fuck's sake. I mean, do I have to repeat it? The hijackings happened. They crashed into the World Trade Center, Pentagon, and Shanksville. The intelligence services withheld information, specifically CIA and the NSA, from the FBI regarding these men, Al-Midar and Hazmi. This happened. If you're going to talk about that, how can you say the report is a lie? Just say, hey, listen, the report is not a full, comprehensive report. It's incomplete. You can't just say it's a lie. That is very irresponsible for him to say and for anyone else to say.
But how did the Bush administration manage to hijack what was sold as an independent commission? And what exactly were they trying to hide? We'll reveal what we found in the next episode.
All right. So that's the end of the episode. Believe it or not, this actually was pretty decent compared to the shit that we've gotten from the 9/11 Truth Movement for years, including Richard Gates' own symposium and that bunch of idiots that they were invited to speak in Washington, D.C. And And I'm pretty disappointed with the people that even went to that, I respected. But nevertheless, at least the counter document was shown here. At least they talked about al-Hazmi al-Midar, and the CIA withholding of information. At least, hey, listen, at least it was talked about. Now, here's the thing. Where will it go from here? I don't know. I've yet to see part 2 and 3 or whatever. Is it a 4-part series? I'm not sure. I forgot. But, some credit regarding Tucker Carlson's series, part 1. Not bad. Way to start so far. All right. I'm still really pessimistic about this whole thing, and for good reason. All right. So thank you very much for tuning in, to staying attentive throughout it, and see you next video. Everybody, take care.